12 German surnames that reveal where your ancestors came from. If your family name sounds German, it may contain more information than you think. Some surnames point to an occupation. Others preserve the memory of a village, a landscape, a social position, or a skill that mattered centuries ago. A few names became common because medieval communities needed a simple way to separate one person from another. The name may have started with one individual, but over time it became a map of the world that person lived in. That does not mean every person with the same surname comes from one single family. A name could appear independently in several towns. Spelling changed when families moved across borders, and clerks often wrote unfamiliar names the way they heard them. The same original name could become different names in America, Canada, or Australia. But surnames still preserve clues. They can tell us what a community valued, which jobs were common, what kind of landscape surrounded a village, and how German-speaking families were identified before modern records became reliable. Today, we are looking at 12 German surnames that reveal the world your ancestors may have lived in. The last name on this list is one of the most common in America, and its meaning is much more literal than most people realize. Number 12 begins with a job that existed in every medieval town. Number 12. Müller. Müller is usually translated as miller. It comes from the German word for a person who operated a mill, most often a water mill or a windmill used to grind grain. That sounds ordinary, but a miller was not simply another worker. The mill was one of the most important pieces of infrastructure in a village. Farmers could grow wheat or rye, but they needed someone with the equipment and knowledge to turn grain into flour. A miller stood between the harvest and the bread that fed the community. Because the same occupation existed in thousands of settlements, the surname appeared independently in many places. Two people named Müller did not automatically share a recent ancestor. They may have inherited the same name because their families worked at separate mills in separate regions. The name also changed when families crossed the Atlantic. Müller often became Müller or Miller in English-speaking records. A clerk who could not reproduce the umlaut might remove it, replace it, or translate the entire surname. So if your family name is Müller, Miller, or Müller, the clue may not be a specific town. It may be an occupation that once connected your ancestors to grain, water power, and the daily survival of a village. Number 11 points to someone who worked with cloth. Number 11. Weber. Weber means weaver. In the medieval and early modern German world, weaving was both a household activity and a professional trade. Families produced linen, wool, and other textiles for local use and for markets far beyond their village. A weaver needed patience, technical knowledge, and access to expensive equipment. In some regions, the loom belonged to the household. In others, weavers worked within a guild system that controlled training, quality, and the right to sell goods. The surname could describe a person who worked professionally as a weaver, but it could also have been attached to a household where the trade was especially important. Over generations, the job might disappear while the name remained. Weber is widespread because textile production was widespread. It does not identify one precise corner of Germany, but it does suggest a family history connected to skilled manual work and the production of cloth. Variants include weaver, weaver, and sometimes anglicized forms that no longer look obviously German. When searching records, it is important to look for spelling changes, rather than assuming every document used the modern version of the name. Number 10 is connected to a craft that shaped the streets of old towns. Number 10. Schneider. Schneider means tailor. The word comes from schneiden, meaning to cut. A Schneider was someone who cut and made clothing, often working with fabric brought by customers or purchased through local trade. Tailoring was more than sewing. Clothing represented wealth, status, profession, religion, and local identity. A tailor had to measure people, understand different materials, repair garments, and create clothing that could survive years of work. The occupation was found in towns of every size, so Schneider developed in many unrelated families. In American records, it may remain Schneider, become Snyder, or occasionally be translated into Taylor. The correct version depends on the family, the clerk, and the generation that arrived in an English-speaking country. A surname like Schneider can also help explain why a family lived in a town rather than on a farm. Tailors depended on customers, markets, and nearby households. The name may therefore point toward an urban or village trade, even when later generations became farmers, factory workers, or business owners. Number 9 belongs to people who worked with wood. Number 9, Zimmermann. Zimmermann means carpenter. It combines Zimmer, meaning room or timber in older usage, with Mann, meaning man. The name described a worker who built houses, roofs, furniture, doors, and structural pieces from wood. Carpenters were essential in regions where timber was abundant and buildings depended on skilled construction. They did not work only in workshops. They traveled to building sites, repaired storm damage, constructed barns, and helped expand villages. The surname often appears as Zimmermann in German records and Zimmermann or Timmermann in American records. Some families kept the original spelling, while others changed it to match local pronunciation. This name can reveal an important kind of mobility. A carpenter might move from town to town when construction work was available. If your ancestors carried this surname, their records may appear in several neighboring communities rather than in one village for every generation. The next name describes movement itself. Number 8, Wagner. Wagner means wagon maker or cartwright. The occupation required a person to build and repair wagons, carts, wheels, and other vehicles used before the age of automobiles. A wagon maker served farmers, merchants, soldiers, travelers, and postal services. The craft required knowledge of wood, metal, balance, and the roads that connected the local economy. A poorly made wheel could damage a harvest, delay a journey, or leave a family stranded far from home. Wagner became common because transportation was necessary everywhere. The name may also appear in records as Wagner, Wagner, or in other regional forms. In some cases, the family may have adopted the name because one ancestor was known for making wagons. In others, it may have been assigned by officials who needed a stable surname. When tracing a Wagner family, do not assume that a famous musician or a wealthy family with the same name is related. The surname was created many times and requires local records to establish a connection. Number 7 is associated with a place where people bought and sold goods. Number 7, Kaufmann. Kaufmann translates directly as merchant or trader. Unlike many occupational surnames, it describes a person involved in buying and selling goods rather than producing one specific item. A Kaufmann might deal in cloth, grain, wine, livestock, tools, or imported products. Merchants connected small communities to larger markets. They understood prices, credit, transportation, storage, and relationships with suppliers. The name could belong to a respected town merchant, but it could also be used broadly for someone engaged in trade. In historic documents, a merchant's social status might vary dramatically. One family could own a large business, another could operate a small stall or travel between villages. Kaufmann is sometimes shortened or changed in immigrant records. Kaufmann, Kaufmann, and Kaufmann are common American forms. The name is particularly interesting in genealogical research because it can overlap with religious migration patterns, especially in communities where families moved together and preserved German language records for generations. The next surname points not to the marketplace, but to the person responsible for judging disputes. Number 6, Richter. Richter means judge. It comes from the German word for someone who decides legal cases or administers justice. In a small historical community, the Richter might be a formal judge, a local official, or a person who held responsibility for resolving disputes. The exact role depended on the territory, the period, and the political system. German-speaking lands were divided among many kingdoms, duchies, bishoprics, and free cities, so titles could function differently from one place to another. The surname does not prove that every Richter family descended from a high-ranking official. Occupational names can become hereditary long after the original job has vanished. A nickname may also be passed to descendants even when the first person was only connected to the legal system in a minor way. Still, Richter can point researchers toward town records, court documents, municipal registers, and administrative sources. If a family carried the name for many generations in one community, those records may reveal a role that church books alone cannot show. Number 5 is one of the names most closely associated with baking. Number 5. Becker. Becker means baker. Bread was a daily necessity, and a baker occupied a central position in the local economy. The job required ovens, fuel, grain, timing, and a dependable supply of customers. A baker's work began before sunrise. Dough had to be prepared, ovens had to be heated, and bread had to be ready when the village or town began its day. In some places, families baked at home. In others, professional bakers served the public and followed guild rules. The name appears in many forms, including Becker, Becker, and Baker. Immigrant families sometimes translated it, while others kept the German spelling. A change from Becker to Baker may have happened gradually through school records, church documents, or the preferences of a new generation. Because baking existed in nearly every settlement, Becker cannot identify one exact ancestral location by itself. But it preserves a vivid picture of an ancestor whose work was tied to flour, fire, and the rhythm of daily meals. The next surname came from a profession that shaped the sound of a town. Number 4. Fischer. Fischer means fisherman. It usually suggests an ancestor who caught fish for food or trade, but the name does not guarantee that the family lived on the coast. Rivers, lakes, ponds, and fish farms supported fishing communities across the German-speaking world. Waterways shaped settlement patterns. They provided food, transportation, power, and trade routes. A fisher family could live near a major river, a lake in the south, or a smaller stream that supported a local economy. The name may also have been used as a nickname for someone who spent time near water or behaved like a fisherman. Surnames are not always official job descriptions. They are labels created by communities, and the original reason could disappear from family memory. For genealogists, Fischer is a reminder to study geography. Maps, parish boundaries, river systems, and historical land use may reveal more than the name alone. A family that appears to move repeatedly may actually be following waterways, seasonal work, or fishing rights. Number 3 belongs to a worker who built the transportation network of the Old World. Number 3. Bauer. Bauer means farmer or peasant. It is one of the clearest examples of a surname connected to everyday rural life. In historical documents, the word Bauer could describe a person who worked land, managed livestock, or belonged to the farming population. It did not always indicate wealth. Some farmers owned land, while others rented fields, served as laborers, or worked under obligations to a local estate. The name may appear as Bauer, Bauer, or in other regional forms. Different spelling traditions developed across the German-speaking territories, and migration often created additional variations. Bauer is common because farming was common. That is both useful and limiting. The surname provides a broad social clue, but it does not by itself tell you whether a family came from Bavaria, Saxony, Prussia, or another region. To narrow the origin, researchers need birthplaces, witnesses, occupations, land records, and the names of neighboring families. The most interesting part of a common surname is often not its meaning, but the specific story attached to one branch of the family. Number 2 describes someone who lived near a residence or worked on an estate. Number 2. Hoffman. Hoffman is commonly connected with a person who worked on or managed a farmstead, manor, or estate. The word Hof refers to a farm, courtyard, or landed property, while man means man. The original Hoffman may have been a farm worker, an estate manager, a tenant, or simply a person identified by association with a particular Hof. In a village with several people who shared the same first name, a location or workplace could become the easiest way to distinguish one family from another. This surname is especially useful when combined with local records. A church register may show several Hoffman families in nearby villages, but tax lists, land books, and estate documents can reveal which household worked on which property. The name also changed across borders and generations. Hoffman and Hoffman are common forms, and some branches adopted simplified spelling after immigration. A missing second N does not necessarily indicate a different family, but it should be documented rather than assumed away. Hoffman shows how a surname can preserve a relationship to land without proving ownership. The ancestor may have managed an estate, rented a small farm, or worked for a powerful household. The name gives a direction for research, not a complete biography. And now we reach the most ordinary name on the list. Number 1. Schmidt. Schmidt is generally associated with a smith, especially a blacksmith. The name comes from the craft of shaping and repairing metal, and it appears in many regional forms: Schmidt, Schmid, Schmidt, Schmidt, and others. The blacksmith was one of the essential specialists in a pre-industrial community. Farmers needed iron tools and horseshoes. Travelers needed repairs. Soldiers needed weapons and equipment. Builders needed nails, hinges, locks, and fittings. Because every town required metalwork, smith surnames emerged independently in many areas. A Schmidt family in northern Germany may have no connection to a Schmidt family in the southwest. The spelling can offer a regional hint, but it is not proof of a shared origin. The occupation could also elevate a person's social importance. A skilled smith controlled knowledge that was difficult to replace. The workshop became a meeting place, and the family name remained long after industrial factories replaced the village forge. If your surname is Schmidt, Schmidt, Schmid, or one of its variants, the name may connect your ancestors to fire, iron, tools, and the practical technology of everyday survival. What these names can and cannot tell you. A surname is a clue, not a complete family tree. The same name may have appeared independently in different towns. A spelling variation may reflect a dialect, a clerk, an immigration officer, or a deliberate family choice. A translated name can hide its German origin entirely. Müller may descend from Müller, but it may also have developed independently in an English-speaking family. The best research begins with the most recent records you can verify and moves backward one generation at a time. Birth certificates, marriage records, death certificates, church books, census schedules, passenger lists, naturalization papers, land documents, and obituaries can connect a surname to a specific person and place. Do not begin with the assumption that an attractive story must be true. Begin with the names of parents, witnesses, occupations, addresses, and towns. Look for the same information repeated across several documents. The meaning of the surname can make the search more interesting, but the records are what prove the connection. The final clue. These 12 surnames preserve different parts of German life: the mill, the loom, the tailor shop, the carpenter's yard, the wagon road, the market, the courtroom, the bakery, the water, the farm, the estate, and the forge. None of these names tells one story for every family that carries it, but each one opens a door. It points toward a craft, a landscape, a public role, or a relationship with the community that existed before modern identity documents made family history easier to record. Your surname may not reveal a single heroic ancestor. It may reveal something more useful: the environment in which ordinary people survived, worked, moved, married, raised children, and passed a name into the future. If you want to investigate your own family name, write it in the comments along with the country where your family lives today. A spelling, a town, or even an old family story can change the direction of the research. And remember, the name is only the beginning. The real story is waiting in the records.